So let me start this video off by asking you all a question. What do you guys think would be the number one thing that will kill the competitive spirit in Yu-Gi-Oh? Now, could this be a lack of a prize support? Well, considering the fact that there's never been that great a prize support in the game, I hardly doubt it. Would it be the onslaught of power creep and cards with very devastating effects that last too long, like King of All Calamities and Utopic Zexal? Very well possible, and you might have something going with that, but that's a discussion for another video. No, what I think will be the number one killer of the competitive spirit in Yu-Gi-Oh! By far will be the current end of match procedures, i.e. the time rules. Now in this video, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to show you a modern interpretation of the end of match procedures along with two other ones that I found. I don't know how old they are. I think one's from like 2013 and the other one may potentially be from way back when. But within the last decade of Yu-Gi-Oh! The end of match procedures have changed and not necessarily for the best. And I'm also going to impose you a question. Did Asaurus cheat? So, I'm going to give you a rough estimate of what happened during locals this week. Now, keep in mind, yes, this was a locals, but OTSs, at least the ones around my part, do in fact run by the Konami official end of match procedures, the PDF. So, keep that in mind. Now, I went up against an opponent. I was playing Crusadia. My opponent, it's round 3. I won 1, he won 1. He decides to go first, or I tell him to go first. He bricks. He bricks, sets maybe like a couple cards. He still has quite a few cards. He sets like 2 cards. By the time his next turn would come, he would probably have like 4 cards in hand. So, I proceed to go with 1 minute and 20 seconds left on the clock. Probably 1:30. That's what we're going to use for this example. And where I decide to go is I do my typical Crusadia play. I normal summon a Borea, link summon for Magus, special summon for Draco, using Magus and then Draco's effect, chainlink 1 Magus, chainlink true. Keep in mind, I'm telling my opponent all this, and I'm asking if it's, as one does in a tournament, you ask if it's all good. I ask him, he says, you're good. I add a Borea back to my hand with Crusadia Draco, and then I use Magus' effect to search for probably Leonis. And then I decide to go into regular. And I take no more than 30 seconds to decide whether I'm going to summon a Borea and go into Needle Fiber or Helix Fiber and extend my plays. Either way, I decide I'm going to attack. It's the best route to take, obviously. I went second. It's almost the end of the match. And, of course, I'm going to attack. So, I don't know whether I'm going for Helix Fiber or whether I'm just going to summon and search with regular. Either way, I would have searched with regular and then just go for an attack. I take no more than 30 seconds to deduce whether or not I want to do this. And of course, 30 seconds comes by, I decide to just summon Leonis, search with Regulux, and then I attack and let my opponent go. Keep in mind, my opponent has maybe like 20-25 seconds on the clock. But of course, he takes his turn, and of course, before he's able to play out his main phase, time of the round is called. Now, under normal circumstances, 30 seconds would not have even remotely have been stalling. In fact, that would have been very reasonable time to consider to weigh out your options. But because when you have only 1 minute and 20 seconds on the clock, time is of the essence. Every second counts. So, of course, he's obviously kind of salty about this. Even quoting to me, you took like 32 seconds to pretty much decide to attack. But I'm like, well, dude, I even show him my extra deck. I'm like, no. I was considering whether or not I wanted to extend or not. Or, like, that's the total issue that I have with these time rules. Is that it doesn't allow you to be reasonable with your plays. It basically, like, because I actually he was clearly salty about this. And I obviously felt bad. Like, I really did. Like, it's not his fault. And And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't really think it was all my fault either. Like, 30 seconds is not an unreasonable amount of time to deduce whether you want to make one play or another. And then keep in mind, of course, no matter which play I would have made, I still could have went into equal max, shedding even more time on the clock. But I opted to just end turn with Regulux attacking, and then he still had time to make his plays. Of course, whether he had time to make his plays or not, he ultimately wouldn't have had time to change the phase. That is the ultimate problem I have with these time rules. They don't allow people to play rationally, and they actually make you feel bad for playing rationally within a time limit. So, what do you guys think? Did a source cheat? Did I stall for time? Or are these time rules just so much bullshit that you can't even reasonably play without being guilty no matter what? So, we're going to go into the time rules now. I'm going to give you 3 separate occasions where the time rules were different. Continue until the end of the current turn. If the duel did not end of the turn that, time was called, go to extra turns. Extra turns. Conduct 3 additional turns starting from the opponent's turn. After you finish your turn, the opponent gets his turn. Keep in mind the leniency of 3 turns is pretty good. Whoever's turn it was, that turn still gets to go on before the 3 turn count begins to come into play. You'll notice these will become stricter as time goes on. If both duelist life points are the same after extra turns are completed, then play will continue on a 1 turn-by-turn basis, with the duelist with the most life points at the end of a turn being declared the winner of that game. So in other words, sudden death. Makes sense, right? Let's go to what I believe to be the 2013 interpretations of the end of match procedures. Continue until the end of the current turn. Same as before. If the duel did not end at the end of turn, go to extra turns. Now, interestingly enough, and again, keep in mind, I only started playing 5 years ago, so I don't know if the last rules were more recent than these ones. I want to think this is the more recent one, because I do remember reading the end of match procedures at one point, and they did state they were conducting 5 turns instead of 3, which I find to be interesting because they literally gave you more time. Probably to exclude the sudden death rule altogether. Yeah, because it looks here that they got rid of the sudden death rules. If both duelist life points are the same after the extra turns are completed, 5 turns, the duel is considered to be a draw. So it seems like they pretty much gave you extra time to complete the matches, but they also added in a draw feature. Whereas before, it didn't look like a game could end in a draw. So whether you want to think that the game coming to the draw conclusion was a good thing or not, it was still at least giving you enough time. I also noticed during these times that there was hardly ever a draw. Usually most people or most decks could pretty much play until one person was a winner and a loser. My point is that there was never really that many times where people drew. I mean, clearly as the rules state, it could happen, but it was very rare. So let's get into the modern 2020 rules, where not only a draw is a thing, but they are more consistent than ever. If time is called when a duelist are in the middle of a game, the current game must have a decision, whether it's a win, loss, or a draw. Once the current game is concluded with a decision, determine the winner of the match by determining the number of game wins or game losses each duelist has for the current match. As always, continue with the current phase of the game. Once the phase is over, stop the game completely. Determine a game winner at this point, with the duelist with the most life points winning the game. Now whether or not you pretty much are going to be the winner or the loser, or it's going to be end in a draw. First of all, you're very more likely to draw these days than ever, which I kind of think it should just be the best person wins. The one who was able to outmatch the opponent better wins. But now you have the case where stalling could literally just get people draws, and people would literally rather draw than lose. So people take advantage of this. Also, this comes to the problem I was discussing with my match this weekend. Once the phase is over, stop the game. Once the phase is over, stop the game. is the biggest problem I have with these time rules, simply because, like, look, my opponent got his turn, but the problem is that just unable to do everything he needed to do to potentially make a play within 20 seconds. And that is the ultimate issue here, is that there isn't a way for people to catch up if they weren't able to do so to begin with. And it basically just of course it encourages people to play slower. It also encourages people like me to feel bad for the guy when I literally took no more than like half a minute to deduce whether I wanted to make one play or another. I just don't understand. That's my overall conclusion here. I think we need to change the time rules so that they're back to what they used to be, where you end the match and then maybe just your opponent gets one last turn. And I know I'm not the first one to say this. People have been complaining about this since its inception. But now that we've had a chance to more or less try to determine how... I mean, you gotta understand, I get it. I get that, like, you know, a lot of people who have complaints with this game or these time rules, they often don't want to look at the people who are A, involved in the game, not just the players, but the people who have to host the events. And B, how late people have to stay afterwards. When you go to a YCS, you got day 1 and day 2. And if they're staying in until like midnight during day 1, competition starts at 8 in the morning, they'll be lucky if they get 8 hours sleep. So I understand for the sanity of the people who have to run these tournaments, these are kind of necessary. And I guess there might have been something involving players who weren't, because they don't pay you, they just give you, when you judge, you don't get paid. What happens is they give you a product. Now, granted, the product is worth money. You might pull a really good card, and they give you, I think I mentioned this in my last video, but they give you they give you like field centers that are worth over $100, but they're not paying you like they pay the judges and people in Magic the Gathering. So they might have something to do with that. But I applaud anybody who is an official. I hope people do watch this, because I think now that we have gotten to the point where we've tried these rules, and I think we're coming to find that they're not working out as well. I think what needs to happen is they need to pretty much make it so whoever's turn it is, he gets to end his turn, and then the last opponent gets to make his turn or end his turn. And then, and if people aren't stalling, because they're not supposed to, this shouldn't take more than, 10 minutes to complete. 10 extra minutes in a round is not, should not extend anything more, but make things a little more fair for the players who are playing the game. So people don't have to be salty about not being able to make any play because 20 seconds is on the round and the opponent just so happened to be not stalling so much as just trying to make a play, deduce which play he wants to go with and which play he wants to stick with, because once you make your play, that's it. That is the problem with the time rules. They punish you for trying to be careful. They punish you for trying to be efficient. And they make you feel bad simply because the time rules don't let you come to the conclusion in a natural way. They force you to rush, and in turns might end up making people lose. Because now they feel like they need to rush or, face the wrath of the salty boy across the table from them, or fear the wrath of the judge that might accuse them of being stallers. That's really all I have to say. I hope people actually watch this. Hope people watch the other content makers who have talked about this already. I don't think this is a very new problem. I just think it's time that we do alter them a little. Come 2021, there are no events this year anyways. But 2021, I think we need to make it so when time ends, that person finishes his turn, then the opponent gets their last turn. That's all I have to say. Peace out, guys.